Welcome to the Chelsea Roar, the Chelsea podcast by the fans for you, the fans, where we base all of our topics and opinions and chat about the great Chelsea Football Club. I am your host, as always, Ian Kelly, and today I am joined by friend of the show, rival fan as always, but you're becoming familiar to our Chelsea boys, Niall, and there's been no bad words yet, so you're obviously doing something right. Of course, host of the great upper tier, Shankly Sessions, and more to come over the summer, actually.
Everything in between.
And everything in between, yeah. He's
As
stealing,
the pun goes.
He's stealing my old tagline, but it genuinely is. Niall, welcome to the show, my friend.
Cheers, pal. Thanks for having me on. Klopp sent me to keep an eye on you, so that's why I'm here. Keep an eye on what you boys are doing and stuff, you know.
Well, he's a wise man, so he's a wise man. Yeah, look, today the reason I brought Niall on today is purely for one reason and one reason only. To bring a different side. I don't know whether it would be a diplomatic side, but to possibly keep me under control here, and not just have, I could have literally went through the pool of any of my Chelsea mates, Chelsea family to come on, but it would have been an hour probably of rip-roaring anger and ranting. So we said we'd try to keep this short and sweet, and you can come on and give your opinion from an outside perspective, because you obviously do like to keep up with transfer news and bring an outside perspective and stuff like that. So look, as the title says, Lukaku must go. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is Big Rom, Lukaku, Lakaka, the Bottler, whatever you want to call him. I don't think he's going to have too much lead in his feet if that call comes from into Milan and he needs to get that tube all the way to Heathrow. There's only a couple of stop-offs for him, and we'll all chip in to make sure that he finds his way nice and quick. So the Belgian flopper, the Belgian jabroni, the trying to use words here that won't get me in trouble. Yeah, I'm going to quit right there.
The worst signing in Premier League history.
No. You know what? Let's say that. Let's begin there. So the return of the prodigal son after having a season under Antonio Conte, gets himself probably in the best shape of his career, to be fair. Scores a bag load of goals, a shitload of goals, and assists with Lautaro. Signs for 97 million. Doesn't seem like he wants to come, but eventually comes home and says, I'm unfinished business at Chelsea. So you remember this, Niall, and to be fair, this is obviously off the back of a Euros as well, where he had a pretty decent Euros, and you were kind of saying this made sense. I think a lot of people thought it made sense, and to be fair, you kind of had me believing too. Some people did have me believing, but like I said to you, I know I didn't say it on the upper tier, but I had said to you there is a little part of me that I'm unsure, but I was all in. Do you know what I mean? It was only a tiny little devil on the shoulder, maybe an angel now, saying, do you know what I mean? I'm not too sure. But we went all in and we said, okay, his first few games, obviously his first game against Arsenal, scores. You're thinking, right, this is what we've been missing. This was the missing piece. This is what everyone thought, including yourself, including Man City fans. And we'll get to where it went wrong, but your initial thoughts on the signing, from your perspective.
Well, you know how excited I was about him coming in, not as a Chelsea fan, but as a rival. And you'll know, if you go back to August, I tipped Chelsea to win the league after signing this guy, because I thought the missing piece was the goals. And I mean, if you look at his history, I mean, bar his stint at Man United, if you look at those two previous seasons at Inter, he was an absolute machine. And any information or any press or any topics that we seen coming out of Italy were all about this boy Romelu Lukaku, who was an absolute baller. And even, I suppose what we should have looked at really was, I mean, a previous Chelsea wise man, Jose Mourinho, had shared a lot of thoughts about this man back in 2014, prior to him, I think, going to Everton.
That's correct. Yeah, he had his first stint was West Brom, wasn't it? And then he had the loan to Everton.
Yeah, but Mourinho at the time shared a number of things that we should have been weary of with him coming in, and we kind of knew from the Man United times as well, that there was a number of issues there that could unfold, which could make it unravel. But we thought with Chelsea coming in off the back of a Champions League win, and with Tuchel as well, and the strength of Tuchel as a manager, as a man manager as well, and what we were expecting from him. We thought that this could potentially be a match made in heaven. Now, we know United fans, obviously rivals as well, we're talking about, we're delighted that you signed him because we know what's coming. And I think some of it, I think if you dissect it down, and we will through the episode, I think the club has to take a little bit of portion on this as well. And I think Tuchel has to take a little bit portion on this as well. That's where I'm coming from. I don't think this is all Lukaku, but I'm not saying that it's 100% Lukaku, or I'm not saying it's 100% the club, but there are issues there that evolved throughout the season that I think could have been handled a little bit better, that not necessarily would have kept them there, but probably necessarily would have made it look a little bit more successful in terms of if you wanted to move them on, or in terms of if you felt you wanted to keep him. And I had a look at that today, and I know your viewers might have a different view on that, because I'd say 99% of them probably want to put him in a taxi and drive him to Milan.
Well, to be fair, the fan base, I suppose, if you're going to rewind in time, the fan base was quite split on it, even after the interview came out, which we're going to get into next, saying, okay, it was pre-recorded, blah, 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 blah. I kind of was very hot about it at the time, but then I said, look, you can win me over if the performances come on the pitch. You know what I mean? It's, the apology videos there. Okay, I'm willing to give a second chance. The one thing about Chelsea fans is, and you've seen it yourself with your own Fernando Torres when he switched to Chelsea, the people at the bridge, forget the Twitter fans, the element of Twitter fans. I don't want to be disrespectful to all Twitter fans. You probably have that section in Liverpool as well that just, you could hand them Messi, Ronaldo in their prime and Brazilian Ronaldo, and they'd still have something to moan about. That's just the element.
They'd still be looking for Ricky Lambert.
You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, too much money. But so there's an element there, but most fans that go to the bridge, even up until the end of the season, we're cheering them on, and kind of, like I mentioned, the Torres one. I mean, Torres didn't hit the heights that we expected, but he was still cheered. You know what I mean? And you've even heard Torres saying, it's crazy. Like, I didn't do what I'd done for Liverpool, didn't, hit the return I meant. He goes, but the Chelsea fans will always be close to my heart because, of this
is kind of my narrative on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Is, I mean, you're fully aware of the curse of that number 9 shirt at times. Anyway, when you think of the players that you brought in, Torres, Falcao, Morata, Higuain, they've all in some respects faltered.
Well, the last consistent one, which shout out to the Chelsea fan cast, the boys Stanford Chidge and Mark, who's obviously on the show. Like, they done a season review of the 2001, 2002 kind of season. I was like, Jimmy Floyd is the last consistently Crespo. I mean, if you look at his goals, was absolutely fantastic. Even in the season he wore the number 9, that was obviously just personal issues. But I would say Crespo was the last one that had a goal to game ratio that you would expect from a number 9 at Chelsea, right?
Yeah, I read about this curse of this number 9 jersey, and it was weird as well. I went back as far as Chris Sutton. it was mad the way I looked at it, just I said, this has me intrigued, but yeah, I mean, I suppose if you, it's a weird one as well, but I suppose if you
go back, even poor old Paul Furlong had a stint.
Maybe this is the case. Just take the 9 as a squad number out of the Chelsea
we are beside a grave in a cemetery, as you know. So it's You know,
Absolutely.
There was a reason Khalid Boularus was given that number 9 as a right back. And that fucked him up too. Yeah. He forgot how to defend if ever he didn't know how to in the first place. I don't know.
Yeah. But if we teleport back to 2014 and we talk about what Mourinho said, it's quite insightful. Nearly 10 years on. He turned around when Lukaku was there and when he was exiting, I think, going to Everton at the time, and he said there's a mentality issue. He says, and he was talking about in terms of motivation as well. He says that the lad is demotivated at times, and because he's demotivated at times, it affects his fitness. We know that he can very easily put on weight, and these things happen. And he says when he's demotivated, this is where he kind of falls off the wagon a little bit. But he spoke about his mentality as well. And he also spoke about, I think at the time, if I can remember rightly, he spoke about Lukaku. He's the kind of player that needs a team built around him as opposed to being a team player. And they're key points that he made back in 2014. 8 years on we are now. And the narrative remains the same if you think about where it's all sort of gone a little bit awry or wrong, if you like, you know. He came in, started out really well, as you said, this season. You guys were flying, absolutely flying. It was gravy at the time. And of course, I was sitting back all smug going, sure, I predicted this with Chelsea. I'm happy. Like, this is what was going to happen, you know what I mean? And then he got injured. And when he got injured, a bit of poundage went on, let's say, and he came back and he struggled with his fitness. And if you remember back to that time, I think as well, Tuchel. The one thing about Tuchel, and it's very like Klopp as well, is when you ask him a question or you interview him, you kind of get some truths that maybe shouldn't be spoken about as open as they are.
They're German. They
just if you ask them a question, they answer that question, and they answer it in a way that's I mean, we've seen it with Ranić at United this season, where he just threw the club under the bus. Yeah. You know what I mean? So they say what they have to say. And I think at the time, if you look at Lukaku was a kind of guy, for a big guy, he needs to be babysat and cuddled, and he needs to be felt appreciated. And we know that there's different players need to be managed in different ways. And I think what happened was there was a kind of a souring there, because I think Tuchel was quite direct in his approach to him, as he probably is with all the players at Chelsea. But some people have a backbone to take it, and some people go back into their sort of shell and they don't take it, and they take offense to it. And they go, well, you're a bit of a bollocks, so I'm not really interested.
You know, I do agree with you there. You know, I'm all about psychology, and I understand the narrative that you're coming from there.
And we know a guy like Lukaku, he operates on the thin line. There's no in between with him. He's either happy or he's sad. There's no middle ground with him.
But here's where we go though, into the interview, right? Which is supposedly pre-recorded. And I take everything you've said, but I also take it with a pinch of salt when it involves Lukaku, because he's supposedly this intelligent guy. He can speak 6 languages. And look, being intelligent, you have to be intelligent to be able to speak 6 languages. I get that. But you also have to have a bit of fucking cop on and street smarts about you too, none of which I think Romelu Lukaku has. I think he's driven by ego 100%. I mean, he's one of the most egomaniacal people I've ever seen in sports. Yet, you know, it doesn't always coincide with what he's doing on the pitch. Now, for a very intelligent guy doing an interview in Italian with Sky Italia and expecting it not to come out. And this is as he's made his comeback and things are going fine. He comes and scores the winners against Villa, great header. And even though it was pre-recorded when he was unhappy, he probably thought, oh, grand, everything's okay now because I'm scoring goals again. But then this comes out. He issues the apology All right, which was the biggest load of bollocks, really, when I look back on it now, because I didn't buy the apology either. It was a teleprompter, and he's smiling the whole way through.
That was a smoothing of the waves, an attempt to smooth the waves.
And it was, but look, we said, okay, let's get on with it. We have a season to get on with here. We have multiple injuries here that we need to get on with. We need the guy that we paid 100 million for, basically. And right, we're going to go into a timeline here where we can do it. So he apologizes. Then pre-FA Cup, as he's coming back later in the season, he refutes the claims from his agent. Nobody speaks on behalf of me. Sacks his agent, hires a lawyer.
As most players do.
As most players do. But this guy, I mean, he's the Optimus Prime of you know, of his own self, but really he's a Decepticon. Do you know what I mean? For any Transformers fans out there, because he hires a lawyer then to work out a deal with Inter Milan. Also, we find out that, okay, this agent was actually speaking the truth. He wants to talk to Todd Bowley and the new owners.
For once, an agent speaking the truth.
For once, an agent speaking the truth. We find out, we hear murmurs that he basically wants to speak to Todd Bowley and the new owners. And Thomas Tuchel said, well, that's kind of strange. I would have thought he wanted to have a conversation with me first, considering I'm his manager. Okay. Yeah. And that shows you what Tuchel really thinks and knows about this guy. And then we find out, which is reported by Di Marzio, so these guys are in the know. So some leaks. I mean, very trusting fella, Lukaku, isn't he? Going back to his teammates, which have leaked information.
See, I think right now you should stop this. We should cherish this moment on the Chelsea Roar. This is a time to clip this. We have a Chelsea podcast here with you, a Chelsea fan on, and me, a Liverpool fan on, talking about an agent speaking the truth and about the press speaking the truth.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love the way we've just segued into this.
Very rare. It's very rare. And this time they've got it right, because it turns out the Marzio and co have said that he was texting his Inter teammates even after the apology video, saying he was coming back. Don't forget one of the quotes
he was apologizing to them for having to apologize to you.
Unbelievable.
That's what that was.
He even told Lautaro not to come to Chelsea because I'll be back with you very soon. I mean, there's no end to this guy's, buffoonery, really.
This can't even be called conspiracy anymore now.
No,
because you've got a book of factual situation there. It's
baffling, isn't it?
Well, it's not baffling, because you've laid it out very nicely there. So there's nothing baffling about it, really, except the fact that I think from his point of view, he sees himself always as being the main man, and that there's no I in team except when it's Lukaku.
But not willing to work for that. You know what I mean? It has to be. You know what I mean? It's got to be his way.
I think he probably is willing to work for it, because you've seen it in the first month of the season, and you've also suggested as well in a number of performances towards the back end of the season. You've seen when he does work hard and he is motivated,
playing for the move, though.
Look,
not playing for the badge. You see, this is why
I don't think if the narrative is correct here, I don't think he had to play for the move, because we're going down the road here that this was already in the pipeline.
Well, this is now so the move. This is where we get into the technical stuff. There are some out there that believe that there is a breach of contract case that could come against Lukaku, and rightly so. And Chelsea would well be within their rights to maybe have that looked at.
Be nice if you could get 100 million in damages, wouldn't it?
Well, but this is kind of, I suppose, where Chelsea are probably trying to play smart here, because there is still money owed. That 97 wasn't just a straight up cash transaction. There's still money owed on this.
Absolutely.
So they're looking for hefty loan fees and a guarantee that that there will be money paid up and there'll be a permanent transfer within a year or two. And then possibly subsidising a very small part of the wages, depending. Apparently Lukaku has agreed to lower his wages to go back or whatever, but that's neither here nor there. The main conspiracy, I'm glad you mentioned it, is, and it's not that far-fetched when you think about it, because we know
that's where I was coming from. I didn't feel it was a conspiracy with what you've laid out.
And this is where I heard a couple yesterday, and a shout out to a lot of the Chelsea fans on Twitter, some of the big accounts as well. Eunice actually said it. This seems very pre-planned between Inter and Lukaku. And when you think of the financial situation Inter have been in, to get a nice wad of money, get him off the wage bill, and then all of a sudden the interview comes out and he makes a problem at the right period of time. Doesn't seem that far-fetched, especially knowing how corrupt the Italian clubs, some of the Italian clubs, can be and have been over the years. So
let's just say our love for Italian football extends way beyond football.
Yes. It's very alarming what's going on here, isn't it? And I do think that I think if he gets the move, I still think there's going to be an investigation here. You're talking about new American owners here that are going to go, something doesn't smell right here. I mean, listen, it's the land of what's the word? The lawsuit, right?
The land of milk and honey. The land of milk and honey.
And hopes and dreams.
That's it.
But nothing comes free. So you might get that move, Rom, but there might be a little receipt at the end of this. I'm sure that there's legal teams possibly on Chelsea side looking into this. I'm sure for the harmony of the dressing room, for the harmony of, for Tuchel to just get on with it, get new signings in. They want this rat out the door. Yeah, get this rat out the door. I mean, it's all well and good saying, listen, pay is 375 grand a week. This absolute imbecile is getting, and he's unhappy. What a fucking moron. Fuck off, Rom. I hope, it's a pity. If he was playing for Inter, the first time I've ever said this, I'd have hoped that injury was more serious, because, karma is a son of a bitch, and I've never wished injury on anyone, but I wish all the bad luck on this man. He is a piece of shit. Somebody,
I'd never go that far, because sometimes that comes back to bite you.
Well, listen, I've been out
that much on him.
I've been out with a bad back for the last 2 weeks, so trust me, I know you Liverpool boys use burn jerseys when people leave, so don't give me that nonsense. with pending Mane, so we'll see how the reaction goes there. No, but
normally when I make the videos of throwing the jerseys in the bins, I put a nice black bin liner in first. I throw them in. Exactly. When the camera stops, I go back, take it out.
Yeah, take it out and just spit in it and wipe your nose. But look, obviously I don't mean actual serious injury, but like I hope he gets a really bad flu, not coronavirus, but like a really bad flu where he feels real uncomfortable for a week or two, and just like has a rotten 2 weeks. Do you know what I mean? Like even the tea that he's drinking isn't, although this motherfucker be eating hamburgers. So, but I hope there's no taste from the hamburgers. I hope there's no, you know what I mean? I just hope the saliva is falling into everything that he eats, and he just has a miserable 2 weeks, and then he gets up and he's okay. But no, listen, it's deep here with this motherfucker, because he's used our club to say, oh, I've been a lifelong Chelsea fan, I modeled my game on Didier Drogba. Listen, motherfucker, you could not even lace the great Didier Drogba's boots. In fact, I'd say Drogba has will completely cut ties with him after this, because they were pretty close, and I'd say Drogba was just appalled by his actions. It's quite clear that there's been snake activity going on. Listen, we called Courtois a snake. He went because his family wanted to go to Madrid. This guy is going purely because he's not getting what he wants. And I think when it all really boils down to it, I'll hand it over to you here, so I don't go on a too much of a rant. But I've heard some people say, like, this guy, and everybody now that did defend him in the Chelsea community has completely done a 360 and went, nah, this guy is possibly the worst, definitely the worst, could be the worst signing in football history, because you look at the way things have transpired and the attitude. But signing a 5-year contract, knowing that he's set himself up, but not only that, the worst attitude of a sportsman possibly look, there's been a lot of bad attitudes in sports, but in terms of the elite level, the top echelon where you're supposed to be in the top 10 players in your field, you know what I mean? And I don't think that would have been, like, based on the signing itself, you would have said Romelu Lukaku was probably in the top 10 players in the world on the form that he was in with Inter Milan. So based on that, a lot of people are making the accusation now that he has the worst attitude of any elite level sportsman possibly ever. And it doesn't seem to be a new thing, judging by the research you've done with Mourinho's comments.
Yeah, no, it doesn't seem to be a new thing, and I wonder, should have been a warning sign to Chelsea at the time.
Should have. You're correct.
And especially when you're going to lay down 100 million, surely there would have been plenty of options out there for 100 million. That might have fitted a little bit better. I mean, we know his history. He wants to be the main man in a team. He wants all the focus to be on him. So everyone else, it's like 10 players and then him. And I know Tuchel brought this up as well, where he said, he says it's not about 10 players serving one player. When this was the discussion about how he was brought in and the system should have been built around, because he was this goal scoring machine. And I suppose if you invest 100 million in a player like that, there's a little bit of validity to that, but also you have to be a team player. You have to be bought into the Kai Havertz and the Ziyech and all the other players that are there. Not just that it's like Lukaku FC as opposed to Chelsea FC. And Tuchel obviously said it's not Chelsea and it's not our football, which is a fair comment. But I think between himself and Tuchel, it broke down very quick. I think there was a bad taste in Tuchel's mouth around the interview and stuff like that. And we remember.
Do you not think that was teammates? Because I actually went back and watched a little bit of this. Right, you saw when he was firing on all cylinders, he was fitting into the system, the same system that Tuchel had been playing. He was fitting into it, and then it looked to me where when he was playing that the teammates weren't really looking for him, and a lot of times. So I mean, he obviously upset a lot of people within the dressing room too.
Yeah, well, I think if you're my teammate and I go do an interview and I throw you indirectly under the bus because I'm talking about the club, I think naturally as a human being, you're going to take offense to it. And I think if you look up and there's a pass on and the pass is to one of your teammates who you care about, or this guy who's given a certain interview, I think your decision is going to be made somewhat. It's going to be tainted by that situation, which is fine. I mean, that's the reality of being a human being. We all have feelings. We all get hurt. You know, when things are going really well, like the first month of the season and he wasn't injured, everyone was happy. You guys were jumping out of the rafters. You know, this has happened. The missing piece in the jigsaw has arrived. And then it went astray, and then it went further astray, and then it became toxic. And then you realize, you know, I suppose you have to go back and look as well. I mean, when you were really firing on all cylinders, you know, that's when you got those injuries as well. And that derailed things somewhat a little bit as well. He got injured. I think at the time you lost Chilwell, which was a huge loss. I think further on from that, then I think Reece James went out with an injury. So you really lost that whole shape of that attack, that power of that attack that Chelsea had at the time. And I think what happened there was when he came back in, there was an expectation because of those players that you had lost. He was going to have to work a little bit harder, and he wasn't the prize gem, and he wasn't going to get things handed on a plate. He was going to have to become part of this team that would have to galvanize and work harder because of the players that you lost to get through that period. And then, of course, the interview happened. Things got toxic. There's no doubt Tuchel wanted him gone, but when you invest 100 million in a player, your hands are somewhat tied. You have to figure out how you get to the end of the season. You have to figure out where you use them so you retain some of that value. And I'm sure even Chelsea, forget about all the talk that he was doing about texting mates or contacting mates and, you know, orchestrating a move back to Inter Milan and all that kind of stuff. I think that's probably what was going to be on the cards anyway, because I think he had poisoned himself too much. And I think Tuchel had resorted to the fact, if you look at the way Tuchel spoke about him in interviews and in the press, as opposed to the way you look at Kai Havertz, who missed a bit of time this season as well. But he doesn't talk about Kai Havertz the same way he talked about Lukaku. And I think from that situation, from that time on, I think there was no other option, but he was going to have to go. Now, albeit, and I mean, you were in on this as well. If you go back 8 weeks ago, when he was starting to look really good in those games prior to the cup final and stuff like that.
Well, there was two games. Let's be real. There was two games. One was against Wolves, where he won the penalty, scored it, and then the next one was Leeds, where we were already winning, and he scored, which we were happy about.
Yeah,
and then he done.
Well, he was also playing well, and he was also working hard.
Yeah, but then the FA Cup final. Games. Then the FA Cup final hits, and he's back to old Romelu Lukaku. No passion, no nothing. Yeah.
But I suppose at that time, if the thoughts were, maybe we might be able to work something out here. Maybe it's not all lost. Maybe we can figure out what we're going to do with him and this kind of thing. And then, as you said, all the other stuff that's come out now in the last week or two or whatever it is, means that position is unattainable at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
And that he basically has to go. And I think you guys have to find a way to reduce your exposure and your loss on the deal. But I think if it's a new beginning, new owners, as you said to me off camera tonight, Tuchel has been given full power to push ahead with signings and all that type of stuff, which is the way it should be. Yeah, the manager should have the most influence on who he wants, and then it's up to those other people to put the deals together to get him the player. I think you just have to. I think you just have to move him on, get what you get, whatever the deal is. I know it's going to be horrible to have to deal with Inter Milan. I know more will come out on this. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I don't think it's over to you.
No, I don't think it's over, and I think it will rumble on. And no doubt, if a deal does come about where he goes back to Inter Milan, and you guys move on from it, I think there will be internal stuff spoken about from your end, and I think there will be a lot of stuff coming from his end as well. Because there's no doubt once he arrives back at Inter Milan, if that's where he ends up, he's gonna give a shitload of interviews. And you think there's a distaste now? Wait till you see what the distaste will be then.
This is where we kind of look at it now, and we can kind of we'll close up soon, but we look at it, and I mean, the world of football is talking about how bad his attitude is. I know we've seen links with Bayern Munich and stuff like that. I mean, Bayern should not touch him with a barge pole. You know what I mean? It's well and good thinking the goals are there, but no other team really should. And there's a reason that there's other teams that are being linked, and it's only like Real Madrid, slightly, and Bayern that have been mentioned. But quite clearly, that's coming from the agent side to try and build up some sort of interest or whatever. This guy, like, even opposition teams are going to look at this guy and go, no, this you've ruined your legacy in football now, mate. You can stay with Inter Milan and do what you want there, but you know, this will trickle down, won't it? And be like, right, that guy is just actually
that guy,
a bad human being, just a bad human being in terms of, because he is a bad human being in terms of his professional life. But absolutely, he's shit at his job. He's shit at, you know, well, he has been shit at his job this year, but he's certainly shown two sides to him that he is just utter bottom feeding, you know, hermaphrodite. Really.
I suppose if you isolate the football from the person, I mean, in terms of football, I mean, he has had a number of standout seasons there at Inter Milan. And I think that has to be looked at as well.
But what happens then when the going gets tough and a different manager comes in? You know, if you know, because don't forget, like, Inter Milan aren't going to be happy looking at AC Milan now with their new owners and winning the league and saying, right, we want to be there, but we don't have the money, blah, blah, blah. We want to build, you know, Simeone and Inzaghi didn't exactly set the world alight there. So what if another manager comes in and goes, I don't like your attitude, mate? What do Inter do then? I mean, especially if and you know the Chelsea Chiefs are going to go, we're not signing off on a deal that allows you to send him back to us. That's it. Like, legally binding.
No, I think the talk last week was it wasn't a loan move with an option to buy. It was a loan move with a full commitment to buy.
Yeah, and if you break that contract, you're going to court and you're full. So this is where maybe the Chelsea Chiefs are being a bit shrewd here and saying, okay, no problem. We see what you did. Yeah. We're going to raise the stakes. You want them back that badly? Let's have them. No problem.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is, I mean, as a football manager, and I've huge admiration for Thomas Tuchel. I've spoken on your show a number of times with what that man has dealt with in the last 12 months. Like, to hold it all together, and I know he blew a gasket a few times with the Ukraine stuff and all that kind of stuff, but to hold it together as good as he did and to remain that professional, I think he did an outstanding job. What I would say is, you're always in that situation at the top end of football, and I put Chelsea at the top end of football. You're going to get players in at times that are difficult, that don't work out, that need a cuddle, that don't respond to, they don't get motivated by you throwing them under the bus. And I think as part of this process, and as part of Chelsea having to move him out and regain whatever finances they can and move on and launch the new Chelsea, the Bollier and stuff like that, I do think Tuchel himself should look at maybe how he managed the whole situation through the process. And I know there was a lot of pressure there as well. I know there was injuries. I know there was the Roman stuff. I know there was the interview.
I disagree. I think
I don't think a manager, when you're dealing with, when you know you're dealing with a player like him, and I'm not saying make allowances.
No, but we're not privy to the conversations. We're not privy to the conversations that were had behind closed doors. Maybe the fact that this is the only one that he's done it to, maybe it was a case of like, he's not reacting to the arm around the neck. He's not reacting to this. He's not reacting to that. It's quite clear. I mean, the fact that the teammates, as you mentioned earlier, didn't want to pass the ball to him. Maybe he just felt this is a toxic person.
Yeah, but I'd imagine, absolutely. But I'd imagine the arm around the neck at that stage was more a headlock than it was a cuddle. And I just think what happens is, I think if you're trying to motivate a player, even if your goal is to move him out at the end of the season, you have to find a way to motivate him to get the best out of him. As you said, to either put him in the shop window or decide what you're going to do. Now, I know you'll say, okay, in the last couple of days, stuff has come out that will lead you to believe that this was a master plan from a financial point of view, from a club that was really, really struggling. And I understand that, and I totally buy into that with what you've said. But I do think you have to be very careful, and we know how toxic that English press can get as well. They can take those words and absolutely twist them into your spinal column and eat you up. And we've seen it. We've seen plenty of brilliant managers go through that system and get tore asunder. And I think you have to be careful in your furnishing of the information that you give. It has to be done in a certain way. I think, for instance, for example, if Tuchel was talking about Kai Havertz and he put out into the press that kind of narrative in relation to Kai Havertz, I'm of the same opinion as well, that it might get very toxic and negative and not be motivational. And I just think, and it's just a very, very small thing. It's not the sidetrack, and not in any way in a defense in any way of Lukaku. It's more a small, tiny criticism of Thomas Tuchel.
Yeah,
just needs to be a little bit careful in that way.
I'd rebuke that. My rebuttal with that one would be, but that didn't happen. It only happened with the one player. Do you know what I mean? Even with the Marcos Alonso disrespect that we saw on the side of the pitch, he absolutely refuted any claims of an issue. He was like, no, it's over. Remember, we thought a few months back that Marcos Alonso wasn't going to play for Chelsea Football Club again. Goes, no, we had a conversation on the bus. That was it. We move on. It's his handling of the Rudiger situation.
I think in terms of the Rudiger situation, I think he really wanted to keep him.
But even when he knew he was gone, though, even when he knew he was gone, he still came out in glowing terms and asked the Chelsea fans to not, give him any shit. I just think Lukaku, there's no way around it in this. Lukaku made his own bed. He basically dug his own grave in this one. And
which I'm totally not refuting at all, and I'm not defending him in any way, but it would be just because you're at a stage now where you're going to launch the new Chelsea. You're going to be bringing in a lot of high-profile signings potentially, and you're going to be bringing back a lot of talent either off loan or from the academy or whatever it is. And I think at this time where you have that kind of rebuild and you're bringing in a lot of new talent and stuff like that, I think you have to be very careful in the way you manage that and approach that. These are going to be a lot of new signings that are coming in and stuff like that. And I think in his way, he has to be just a slight bit more dynamic in his approach, as opposed to, just being straight up and going, like, if he took that approach with a Pau Torres or a Kunde, it could potentially go toxic. I'm not saying it would. I'm saying it could. And I think those conversations are to be had in the training ground, at the club, with the player, not necessarily the information that should be furnished to me or you or the press. And I think that's a key thing when you're managing guys like that.
I think
and
so.
Don't get me wrong. And look at Chelsea. Look, Chelsea are still going to get in players that are emotional players that feel that they are the stars and they have to be molded into that team effect. And Tuchel has all the skills to do that. We've seen it with Klopp as well. Sometimes you bring in someone who thinks they're more than they are and they have to be taken down a notch. And that's the way it is. Yeah. But I just think, I think there's no doubt about it that more players will arrive there and will need to be managed in a slightly different way. And you have to be careful because yourself, one interview, one conversation, and how the press run with it over there.
No, but toxic. I think where a lot of my listeners are probably going to jump on you on this one is that, like, the facts are here that this was after the fact that this idiot had done an interview. You know what I mean?
But it was also after the fact where he had apologized, and it was also after the fact where Tuchel came out and said he's apologized and we're now going to move on.
Oh yeah,
so you have to allow for that. To allow for that as well.
But there was nothing said then. Do you know what I mean? That was the thing. There was nothing said after that. We're still focusing on what was said at the time. There was nothing said after that. The only thing he's actually said since is, geez, that's interesting that him and his team want to speak to the new owners. I would have thought they wanted to speak to the manager.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's basically very smart, in my opinion, of going, what's this guy up to? I see a snake.
It's the two fingers.
Of course it is. No, but look, I see your point, and that's why I brought you on today. In fairness, nothing you've said is incorrect, and that's why I wanted a little bit of balance, because you need balance. There's no point in the two of us ranting just solely about. And I get where you're coming from. I suppose as we wrap up, you mentioned, obviously we spoke off air, that it's come out today. Matt Law, very, very, very resourceful and pretty accurate when it comes to Chelsea, has said that basically the power and all from Marina is gone. We know Marina is probably going to be gone now at the end of August once these deals. Her part is going to be to negotiate prices and stuff and do what she does best. And look, I think it makes sense. Look, I appreciate everything not everything Marine has done, because Danny Drinkwater is only left now and Timo Bakayoko still on the books. But doesn't it just lend more credence then to, now we're looking at a situation where the manager gets the players that he wants. And when you're bringing in a director of football, you need to bring someone in that has a chemistry or a synergy with the coach, with the head coach, with the manager, so that they can go, right, I know exactly what Tuchel likes. I mean, I know the latest is that the favorite to be the new director of football is the Italian guy who's the director of football with AC or Atletico Madrid.
Saying that the other day,
which makes sense, because obviously, football teams now, especially at our level and your level, you know what I mean? It's like Edwards for yourselves. There's going to be someone there that they do as much scouting on the staff that they hire in coaching and at that level as they do on footballers. So obviously they've seen, right, he could work with Tuchel, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to bring someone in that the director of football has basically almost got the same way of thinking as the manager, going, well, look, Thomas, I have this guy. I think he's fucking perfect. Thomas can go, oh, absolutely, yes. Let's get the scouting team on him a little bit more. And that's the balance, isn't it? You got to get hand in hand.
Yeah, you look at the blueprint, and the blueprint for me is when you think about Fergie with the Edwards and you think about Fergie with David Gill. And
I said like Edwards about Liverpool. My apologies. I meant...
No, it is. Michael Edwards is at Liverpool. He just left, actually. Julian Ward has taken over. But when you think about Fergie, who was in the height of his success and he was signing players and stuff like that, it was literally him and literally that director of football or that guy who negotiated the deals. And Fergie laid out who he wanted. And these guys went off, looked at the financials and seen whether it fitted with the club or not. Didn't always get who he wanted. And I think Tuchel will be in the same boat as well. I'm sure he'll have a nice list of players that he wants. He may not get them all for various reasons. Who knows? It may not just be financial and stuff like that. But certainly, he should be the guy that is saying, this is what I want, A, B, C, D, E, and let's see what we can get, and does it fit? Who knows? You know what I mean? Even that guy who comes in might turn around and go back to him and go, yeah, we know you want in Darwin Núñez, but Darwin Núñez is now 100 million. And where do we go with this? But at least that narrative will be there. Yeah. But it's a massive opportunity for Chelsea to relaunch and stuff like that. And I think, look, that saga with Lukaku, there'll be books written about it probably in years to come and stuff like that, of what went on and stuff like that in interviews. And I'm sure there'll be shade thrown both ways over the next 6 to 12 months and stuff like that till he's finally gone, if you like, if it is a loan move at first. And I think even as a loan move will hurt Chelsea fans, because the fact that you'd be paying a portion of his wages to play for Inter Milan, that will cut deep into that wound. It'll be a tough one to have to swallow. But if the deal at the end is that he's gone, well, then you have to accept that.
Well, I think the fact that, and a lot of Chelsea fans need to remember this, and other football fans, when they're talking about the previous regime, the previous board and stuff, and I'm just going to end with this. We need to remember that this is going to be a brand new board. Marina and Buck, their days are numbered. They're here till August. Well, Marina certainly anyway. There's going to be, Scott McLaughlin, chief scout, and I say that in inverted commas. I heard a great one today. Well, if I'm looking at Raheem Sterling and Osman Dembele and we're saying, okay, who do we sign? Ask Scott McLaughlin and then buy the player that he doesn't say. Do you know what I mean? This is how bad this guy is. Chief scout, absolute numpty in terms of his work at Chelsea, just absolutely dreadful. So those sort of things are going to be changed. You're going to see lots of backroom changes. But don't forget, Chelsea are now pretty much one of the only elite debt-free clubs in the world, because that's all. But this is a clean slate. So whatever happened under the previous regime, this is probably why Todd Bowley and co are saying, okay, well, look, we can subsidize a loan move where we're getting back in the end. We're going to make our money back within a year, within two, because that 100 million or that 97 million commitment is now gone, because that doesn't really affect the club yet, especially if you're sending back. You know what I mean? So that's probably why we're in a very unique position where we can loan them back, probably subsidize the wages a little bit, but that there's a guarantee to buy in the end, which will cover that and then make a profit, considering we're at zero. Do you know what I mean? We're at a zero balance, basically. So people need to take that into consideration as well. There's context behind it. And I think it is so important for the dressing room and for Thomas Tuchel to just get rid of that type of toxicity out of the dressing room, move on. But look, we'll close up. We call this episode Lukaku Must Go. I think we're both in agreement there. Do you have any closing words on just his attitude and what he's done and how it could have possibly been different? Or
well, we know how it could have been different.
Yeah, sure.
He should have come in and committed to the deal. And if he wasn't going to do that, then he shouldn't come in. And leaves a bit toxic. But I think with Chelsea, I think with the new regime coming in and the level of accountability that's going to be there, because these guys are multi-billionaires and they don't become multi-billionaires without keeping people accountable. And I think going forward, I think you will see less situations where Chelsea makes signings, especially of this level, that aren't thoroughly sense checked and don't lead to failure. I think you'll see much more successful signings. But I think the fan base has to be a bit more patient, because I think in trying to do that, I think it takes longer to get players over the line. And I think that's not a bad thing. I think if you've highlighted a guy and you've targeted him and you're in talks with him and you're trying to sign him, it's good to sense check that stuff and go back and look at that. And I think, to be honest, if Chelsea had done that and gone back and looked at what Mourinho said in 14, they may not have signed him, and they may have saved themselves a whole headache and hassle. And I think that's a good thing. And I think with Bowley coming in, I think he will hold people to account, including Thomas Tuchel. And I think they'll have to be absolutely spot on in who they want, what value it's going to bring, how much it's going to cost, what the payback is going to be to Chelsea. And they won't be able to just rock up to Roman in the director's box and go, we want Morata or we want whoever it is. They're going to have to put in a fairly decent narrative about why this should happen and who he wants. And, you live and die by the sword. And I think it's going to be a whole different ball game for Chelsea, and quite an adjustment for the fan base, because the fan base is used to Morata, Torres, Higuain, whatever it is. I think now it will be slower, but way more successful. And I think that'll only lead to success for Chelsea down the line.
That's it. Yeah. And it's quite articulate, everything you've said there. And I think it's fair. I mean, I called it, didn't I, at the start of the season with you on this podcast. I said, I think you're going to see a lot of money spent this year for that, those 5 or 6 players I mentioned. I know you're not the biggest fan of Dembele. I know you're not against him with just his injury record and stuff like that. But look, if Tuchel wants him, we keep saying back to manager, if Tuchel wants him and he thinks he can get the best out of him and he thinks he's what he needs for his team, then unfortunately we have to just go with it. Or fortunately, depending on which side of the coin you're on. But that's the sort of way you back your manager and go, right. And as you said, you live and die by it. Don't forget, it's a free transfer as well. There will be sell-on value there regardless. I know the wages will be high and whatnot, but I'm just using him as an example. So you're going to see, the 200 million spent, or depending on what players go as well, you'll probably see a little bit more spent for that 4 or 5 players. And I think then they're going to get to a point where they're like in Liverpool's position where they have the core of their team there and you only need to go and make that one big signing. You know what I mean? You don't need to go and buy 2 or 3. That's why
you
I
have
said
your foundation, so you're creating your squad.
Exactly. That's why
so
I
you
predicted.
Can deal with it.
Well, I predict here and now, I'm going to lay my cards on the table. I think next year, the end of next season, you see Declan Rice at Chelsea for a much lower fee than what West Ham want, because they have to sell. Because they cannot risk Declan Rice going for free. It's just it's unfathomable for a business to allow that. So this 150 million, I think you'll see go down to possibly 60 or 50 million next season, because it'll be panic. You know what I mean? It could possibly be a bidding war and they'll probably drive up to 70, 80 million, maybe. I doubt it with 1 year in his contract. But
I would hope for the future of Chelsea that when things like that happen, I would hope that it comes around and that there's a bit more sensibility to it, that if things with Declan Rice and stuff like that do get silly, that Chelsea are clever enough to back out of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you look at Todd Bowley, very data driven, very smart. I mean, it's funny enough what I said to you as well when he took over the LA Dodgers. We've lost Noel, so we're going to call it there. We've called it quits on this one. I was going to say LA Dodgers. Yeah, they're data driven. They signed a lot of big players, but it's been an absolute pleasure. For Noel, I'm going to say thank you as well. Thank you to each and every one of you for listening. I don't even need to ask the question, are you Lukaku in or are you Lukaku out? Because we're all Lukaku out. But until the next time, thank you very much, each and every one of you. Noel, you get to say hello. I signed off for you there, so you get to say goodbye to the Chelsea Roar.
Best of luck, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
At least you came back to say goodbye. Listen, until the next time, keep the blue flag flying high, keep the faith, and eat as much celery or throw it as you can.